Welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmaila. This is David Lichtenstein. Before we begin our program, I want to make an announcement. We've said that during this coronavirus incident, which people aren't going to yeshiva, many aren't going to minyan, etc., people feel ugarisin, right, detached. Yeshiva Shalmaila is opening a coronavirus yeshiva. We'll see how it goes. The shiurim from 6 in the morning till 10 at night with a stop in the middle of the day. And there are minyanim. If you're used to davening, you're going to be able to say Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. So if you go to the site, if you go to our site, there'll be a link right on the right-hand top that connects you to the coronavirus yeshiva, which is called yeshivashalmaila.com. It's a little bit of a long spelling. I think maybe an easier way is to do it through our website. And I believe YSM, yeshivashalmaila.live, L-I-V, also will take you there. Any time of the day, except for middle of the day, you'll be able to hear a Zoom shiur, and participate. Go argue and learning, and Halacha, Hashkafa, we have Chasidus, Rabbi Jacobson, all different types of the best Magid shiurim. We still have openings during the day you can see. If you know a Magid shiur who says on Zoom, we'd love to have him too. To make it literally, we could do 14 hours a day of direct programming. So during this coronavirus yeshiva will be a way to come, b'tzavsa, l'sachtes, ki gavna de'inu b'syachten li'ela b'yechad, af hachi inun l'sata. We will be able to come together as Klal Yisroel to learn and daven together. What a fabulous new idea. And we have a wonderful program this week. Social distancing is going to be with us for a while. The head of Novartis, Dr. Varasimian, said that he doesn't expect a vaccine until late in 2021, basically a year and a half. And what does that mean? That social distancing is going to be the norm. And it's not because the virus has become less dangerous. In fact, Northwell Health just came out with a survey, a data dump, and they said that 1/3 of those who were cured, who actually still left with acute kidney injury that will be with them for life. Many of them are leaving with acute lung injury for life, even having mental issues now with children. But a new reality is going to be setting in because people can't stay in quarantine forever. And social distancing, masks, gloves, staggered work week is going to become the normal. So we went to a few prominent rabbanim and we asked the following questions. We said, on Shabbos, Pikuach Nefesh, 1 of 1,000, Hatzalah, it's Rabbi Kivega, Magen Avraham in a few places, Yimachal Shabbos, it's called Pikuach Nefesh. Now, for work, are we rather enter into a 1 in 1,000 situation? Is there a heter for work? And what about for a mitzvah? How much danger are you allowed to, entertain for the purposes of a mitzvah? If this is the new reality, if you have to go outside and buy a lulav and esrog and pick them up, and the only way is to leave quarantine, well, what's the halacha? Is there a heter of something that's called darkei shalolam? What about a government? Does the government have a right to say, listen, like Trump has been saying, if we do this, if we open up and we, allow people to go back to work with gloves, with, them, still hundreds of thousands more may die. But if we keep the world closed, millions may die. See, these are really very, weighty, iterative, fine questions. And we want to see what does the halachas talk about this. Additionally, we'll be talking about Krias HaTorah, people who are contemplating going back to porch minyan, an outdoor minyan, a social distance minyan, which the CDC in its workplace talks about workplace and the COVID-19 pandemic, recommended health and safety actions, etc. They have an entire list, one of them being masks. So if the Rabbanim Paskin, we should be doing that, well, Krias HaTorah. How many weeks? Are we going to learn 1 week? Or are we going to learn back 7 weeks? So this and other topics, we're going to have Hagoyin Rabbi Sorscher, the Posek from Detroit, Lakewood, Detroit. We're going to have Rabbi Menachen Genack, who everybody listening to this program, he's the head of the OU, the Rav of the OU, the CEO of the OU, all the kashrus of the world. There's no organization that doesn't rely on him, stands on his shoulders. He's going to opine both about, Krias HaTorah, as well as talk about the distancing. We will have the editor of the Journal of Contemporary Halacha, Rabbi Avrohom Cohen, speaking about these topics. And by the way, the data, even though with Rabbi Sorscher, going to Rabbi Sorscher and Rabbi Genack, I'm going to let them, lead the conversation as they see. I want to just tell my personal opinion, for whatever it's worth, is that data came out as recently as this week, and you could Google it online, that they now have droplets can stay in the air for up to 14 minutes. If somebody speaks loudly, it can be ejected 10 feet, 15 feet, and up to 14 minutes, which means if you're going someplace, be it a supermarket, be it work, be it a minyan, 14 minutes, 15 feet, 20 feet, that's really scary. So before you open up your office, your shul, etc., you have to give serious thought. Am I perhaps killing somebody? These are some of the issues that we're going to be discussing with the Rabbanim today. Before we go to our guest, I want to say a vart. My daughter asked me, she's quarantining with us, she said, at a time of his baidadus, when everybody's badad, what happened to, how do we be Mekayim ben Adam l'chaveroi? Well, I guess we could be Mekayim with the people we're with. But let's say you're alone. And my son-in-law, Rav Yada, Mahmad Libi, told me just a fabulous story. He said over a story like this. He said there was an almana, she lived in a building, and she was all by herself. Usually she would go to her children for the Sidarim, but here she's all by herself. You can imagine how sad it is. Erev Pesach, there's a knock on the door. There's a neighbor across the hallway, and a Baal Mashpach, and he said, Geveret, I know you're all alone, and we don't believe, he stood 6 feet away with the Shemaina Lavushim, and he said, what we suggest is, why don't you make the Seder next to the door of your apartment, put your table there, we'll open up the door, we'll make the Seder, we'll move the door, everybody, all 9 of us, will sit around the table by the door of our apartment, we'll do the Seder together. And she was maskim. And they sang, and they said Torah, and they drank the kaisis, they sang, Misha Amda, and Avadam Hayinu, and Chad Gadya. It was beautiful. Matzi Yamtev, her son, calls her up. And he says, Ma, how was it? She says, I'll tell you, I feel so bad for you, you're all alone. And he said, actually, it was really beautiful. In fact, it reminded me very much of your father's Seder when he was alive. Somehow they sang the same, in songs. They knew Avadam Hayinu, they know the Hisha Amda that we sang, the Dayenu that we sang, even at the end, all those, the Mizmorim that we sing, Echad Mi'edei, it's amazing. It's like this person, and there's a long silence on the phone, and the son says, a week before Yom Tov, the guy called me up, and he said, I'm curious, how did your father fear his Seder? So the guy learned the whole Seder, Mahalacha Seder of the Almana's wife, to be able to be Mesameach her. So I ask you, can we be Mekayim ben Adam l'chaveroi at a time like this? I want to ask my brilliant audience a question. What does this week's parasha talk about 5 times, 6 times, the Teichacha, terrible Teichacha of Bechukaisai, V'shav sa'aret Shabbos l'Hashem, but what happens? If you don't, Oz tirtza aretz shapseiseh, you're going to go into Gullus, right? V'saki ha'aretz eschem, it will vomit you out for not keeping Shemitah, right? V'aretz ezkair, Oz tirtza aretz shapseiseh. I have a question for you. What's the most important thing? Talmud Torah keneged kulam, right? Biggest thing, people go into debt to keep their kids in kollel, right? When they want to put people in the army, the yeshivalite, they lie down on the street. What? It's Yereg Val Yaver, it's Shmad. Okay, you don't think Mila. The Romans came, they were Mevatel Mila. They were Mevatel Chodesh. Okay, another one, Arayas. What do we learn? Shabbos, Yom Kippur by Mincha, Parsha of Arayas, right? So if all the Ramach mitzvahs say, right? The Lashon Zayra Kaddish, Ramach, Chasadim from the Zeirampin, or the Shasa Mitzvahs Loisa say, right? Shemitah is the one that we go to Gullus for. I mean, Tefillin, Tzitzis, Kashrus, Taras HaMishpacha, Mikvah. No, Shemitah. Just quite an amazing, when you think of it, step back. Isn't that strange? And here's my second question. Do you believe in coincidences? Like a guy once told me, the guy says, isn't it a remarkable coincidence that President Ulysses Grant is buried in Grant's tomb? Isn't that a remarkable coincidence? So, isn't it a remarkable coincidence that Sefer, the beautiful Sefer of Vayikra, which is the Sefer of Avodah, it's all about the Avodah of Klal Yisrael, not the journeys, just the service of Klal Yisrael, starts with Vayikra, right? And what is Aleph Ze'ira? Rashi says, Hayakar, Miloshin Keri, happenstance. What's the other? How does the parsha end? B'chukai say? Two things will put you into Galus. Shemitah, and the other one, Yana shehalachtem imi b'keri, tilchu imi b'keri, sort of word, lightheartedly, etc. 6 times in the parsha, halachtem imi b'keri. Isn't it strange, remarkable coincidence that the first word is vayakar, keri, and it ends with halachtem imi b'keri? Like, is it really remarkable that Grant end up in Grant's tomb? I want to share with you something. I was oimid on the first Shaila for decades, and there's a Ramban, Chafei Beis, that, who knows, you have to fast 40 days and go to the mikveh 40 times before maybe we could be oimid on a Ramban when he says one of his secretive things. But let me suggest pshat in what the Ramban is saying. He says, Hayomim remez l'maisa bereshis, v'hashanim l'asher yeh bebrias kol yomei olam. V'alkein hichmir hakosav b'shmita yoiser mikol chai v'elavin. He asks our question, why is Shmita more chamer than all chai v'elavin? V'chiyuv ha'golos aleh k'may shehichmir barayis, shenemer oz tirtzes shabseiseh. So he says, why? Because it's merames ambrias kol yomei olam. You could look at it being, but let me suggest what he's saying. I want to go me'oivai to chakmeini. Sun Tzu was a great Chinese general, and he wrote a book that's still used all over the world today. It's called The Art of War. And in The Art of War, he says something, one of his quotes, a very famous quote, he says, strategy without tactics is a slow road to victory. Tactics without strategy is a quick road to defeat. Let me give you a mashal. Somebody says, you know what, one day I want to be a Posek, a dayan. I don't know where it's going to be. I don't know how I'm going to get there. He goes to yeshiva and they say, you want to learn Be'iyan Yavamis again, sugya of Chalitza Psula? He says, listen, Chalitza Psula is fabulous. I'd rather learn Hilchas Ribbis. Every halacha, wherever he could stuff, he learns Mishnah Berurah, takes that seriously. Second Seder, he learns the Gemaras of halacha. He has Chavrusa by night to learn Shulchan Aruch. Bein Azmanim or Bein Astorim, he goes, he sits by the local Posek for a few hours a day. And you know what? He has a strategy. He knows one day he wants to be a Posek. He has no idea how it's going to happen. But you know what happens? One day they come to the yeshiva, they say, son, yeah, every halacha, the boys start asking him, the Yungalite ask him. He doesn't know how he's getting there, but he knows his goal, he's going to get there. The kid says, I want to become a doctor. So what does he do? He goes to medical school. He goes to college. He takes every biology. Bein Azmanim, he goes ahead, he sits in a doctor's office, he shadows. He doesn't, at the end, he's going to figure out how to get into a medical. He knows where he wants to go. On the other hand, you have people, the same, his friend goes to college, who's much smarter than him. He gets an A in biology, an A in science, an A in math, an A in English literature, an A in political science, an A in At the end, what is it? He has a cholent, right? If we don't know the machshava, saif masa, if we don't know which direction, if we don't understand where we're going, right? So what do you have? You have a cholent. You have tactics without strategy is the quick road to defeat. Strategy without tactics, you'll get there. There's a slow road to victory. So let me give it to you. You know, the Torah starts with Vayikra. What does Vayikra mean? A calling. Call. A direction. What's the opposite of Vayikra? Vayikar. Vayikar, happenstance. It's like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. One is, what does the Torah end with? The Sefer, the glorious Sefer of service of Vayikra. Shemitah. What does Shemitah mean? Once every 7 years. Shabbos is, how was your week? How was my ktatala? How did it go with your Rabbi? How did it go? Oh, you had this, your lunches aren't good, you didn't it's wonderful. Well, the Yom Yom, make a cheshbon of the Yom Yom, it's the end of Shavua, is Shabbos. What's Shemitah? Where is your life going? Where is our chinuch going? Where is my mission going? We only have Sheva Shabbos after we reach the age of 20, like the Hillim says, right? So we have 7 Shabbos after. So is my direction right? I'm doing all the tactics. I'm doing tzitzis, tefillin, mezuzah, but maybe you're in the wrong direction. There's no mahalach. It's a cholent. So what is the term? You know what gullus comes from? You could do all the right things. If there's no direction, it's a road to defeat. He lachtem imi bekeri. What does keri mean? It's with randomness. I do a little bit of this and I little do of that. There's no moment of silence. There's no sima slave. There's no hispoineness. Eze derech yishara sheyiver le'adam. Where are you going? Why is this important for the time of the coronavirus? You know, Klal Yisrael has a Kabbalah. Chabar Kabbalah from Eine Heilige Rebbes. That what? Everything has a purpose. From every adversity, we create something. There was nothing more beautiful than the Paraduma. Came along once in a generation. It was pristine, it was stunning. And yet what? When it burns up this thing, the ashes of, we lost something amazing. Could have been your job, it could have been your work, years of effort. It's the ashes of this that turn into the most precious thing in the world. The Mei Tahara, the Mei Hadas, the Rambam calls them. It's the ashes that can purify. The most valuable thing. You can take a tumas mace. Klal Yisrael takes ashes, and we don't just survive them. We turn it into a vehicle to be mitayr, to give us direction. Isn't the coronavirus a type of a shemitah? A stop, shavas, a silence, a moment of silence. What the Ramban calls Yemois Eilam. Where is the world going? The Rebbeinu Shalom's Bria, is it on its tachlis to go where it's supposed to go? Am I part of that mission? You know, the great Chassidish, only a Chassidish could say this, the great Panim Yafis, he says, when Moshe es hayedi hedieni no drachecha, he says, I'm sorry you can't, for Isa Sacharei. It's like the Panim Yafis. What's the next thing? Panai loyiro means you can't see. He says, no. The comma's in the wrong place. Upanai? If you want to see my panai, there's only one way. At a time of loyiro, in a time of hestepanim, in a time of silence, in a time of sima slave, reflection, contemplation, if you want to see panai, the only time to see that is at a time of loyiro. So yes, there's a great gift that could be buried here in the coronavirus, that what? It could be a time of Shemitah. It could be a time of Panai. When do you want to see Kav Yachel's Panai? Lo Yiro, when he's not visible, when there's silence, the gift of silence. Let's go to our riddle of the week. V'chai achicha imach, right? This week's parsha. Ramban says it's a mitzvah asay l'hachayosai. That's where you have the mitzvah of pikuach nefesh b'mitzvah asay. This is Hatzalah is all based upon v'chai achicha imach. And he says that ben Petura shnayim shoyu mahalchem b'derech. 2 people in the midbar. One of them has a flask of water and the other one doesn't. He didn't know, do you keep it or not? So Rabbi Kiva came along and he says, V'darash v'chai achicha imach chayecha koidmin l'chai chavercha. You know, it's imach with you, but I come first. Right? So v'chai achicha means I come first, but if I'm alive, I have to save you. This is Hatzalah's Posek. First me, then you. But imach, the question is, we're saying chayecha koidmin, right? By Eved Ivri, it says almost the same pasuk. It says ki toiv loy imach, right? It says the same thing of imach. And what do we say? Which would seem to imply, if you do v'chai achicha imach, I have to take very good care of him. But it's imach. First comes me, then comes him. With me, but I come first. That's what we say. But the halacha is exactly the opposite. Look in Taisus Kedushin, Chaf Amar Aleph, the Remasal Kala Koine. And the Posek, HaKoine Eved Ivri Kona Adin La'atzmai. If you have one ksus, you give it to him. One pillow, you give it to him. One meal, you give it to the Eved. So here, Imach means, by V'chayach Imach means, I come first. By the Eved, where it says, Toiv La Imach, right? In Zvarim and Tezvav Tezayin, what does the Gemara say? Punkt Fakert. He comes first. Which way is it? That's the riddle of the week. I want to put in a self-serving advertisement. It's, if you learn the daf, you're learning Masechtas Shabbos. Right? The best sefer to come out on Hilchos Shabbos, I think, in a long time, and I say this with a lot of prejudice, I'm going to get a davar, is the Mishnah Achrona, 2 volumes on the Mishnah Berurah Hilchos Shabbos, and it has all the new law. That was my goal, even though there's a lot of beer in there too. It's taken over 10 years to put together, to write, and to edit, and it has fantastic haskamas, including from the Rosh Bahag, Reb Chaim Kanievsky, who writes that he enjoyed it very much, right? And almost, most of the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael, many from America, very beautiful haskamas. So I know you can't go to a Sefarim store now, but if while you're learning Shabbos in the daf, you want to also look up a halacha and see all the chikavarade, all the geshmaka, every debate is in there. And just like here on the program, I don't shut down arguments. I don't say this is how we paskin. On the bottom, we'll bring this is the reason to be mekel, this is the reason to be machmir. This is this one's svara, that's that one's svara. Let a lot of our listeners or readers, let them understand the sugya and understand its stadim, because your case may be unique. So if you send an email to info@headlines.com, we will fulfill this order by mail, even though if you can't go to a Sefarim store. And we're charging $20 for the set, which is 2 big volumes. So it's a very good pricing too. It's subsidized. That's a very self-serving advertisement. And I'm going to also add on something that I don't think you've ever seen before on a sefer, that if you're not satisfied and you don't think it's the best sefer in Hilchos Shabbos that you've ever seen, you send it back. It comes with a full money-back guarantee. Let's go to our fabulous guests.
Joining us from Detroit is a Cohen Rabbi Sorscher. He's the famous Magid Shiur Shas Illuminated, also Rav in Eraisa. He's a Rav and a Posek in Detroit. He was a Rav and a Posek, one of the great Rabbanim and Poskim in Lakewood. Welcome, Rabbi.
Yeah, Shalom David.
So, Rabbi, I'm going to stella vec a few, just thoughts, and you could agree or disagree, but the coronavirus has killed thousands, according to the Mechaber Kadisha, of Fruma people in the tri-state area, right? And it's interesting. I think 80,000 people have died in the United States, over 2,000 of whom are Fruma people in a small area. So a group of the population that represents at the most 500,000 people, right, represents 2.25% of the deaths of a country of 330 million people. So we've certainly been hit. I think it's 20x of the general population. But at the same time, it's an astonishing number, right?
Yeah.
It's at the same time, the country, the president is talking about the need to open up, even New York. And the reason being is they're running deficits of trillions of dollars. And, at some point, it's like, listen, we've gotten educated. We're going to have to do it in an intelligent way with social distancing, masks, gloves, partial work weeks, etc. And the goal is to open up in a way that causes less death, much less death, but it will still cause much more death than if there was just absolute quarantine. But the theory is, if we just stay closed down, ultimately the country will go bankrupt. You'll have looting, social unrest. You could have armed gangs. The sale of firearms has increased exponentially. So the question is, if I were to say from a halacha point of view, you're the Rav, you're the president, you're the president's rabbi. We want to do it from a Torah point of view. And they come to you and they say, I'm going to ask it from many different points of view. One is, Rabbi Sorscher, you're going to paskin this according to Jewish halacha. Can we open the country, even though if we kept it quarantined, X number will die, 1,000. If we open it, Pi Eser will die. But on the other hand, the other option is to keep it closed. How would you, from a halacha point of view, what would you say?
I could only really discuss it. I can't give a real psak. Particularly, there are a lot of variables, and it needs a lot more yeshiva das. But the discussion would be a little bit, there are a lot of other areas where if we would decide to take something which would be considered a great toll on society, it would definitely save lives. If we would decide that any houses with wood are outlawed, and houses just have to be made with concrete and metal, that would probably save lives because the houses wouldn't catch fire. It would cost a tremendous amount, it would be a tremendous inconvenience, but it would probably save lives. If we lowered the speed limit to 25 miles per hour, it would probably save lives. But our chiyuv hishtadlus is if you're doing something which is the halacha considers a sakana, that's asur, that's an isachamer. But in the normal course of regular living, things can happen. Each one individually is lo shchiach. Definitely the cumulative effect would save lives. But that wouldn't necessarily halachically be considered a sakana. It wouldn't go under the gather of sakana because when, let's say, the case of the driving, when you drive 65 miles per hour on the highway, the chances of anything happening at this particular time is very small. It's just more the cumulative effect that would save lives. And the same thing with the houses, etc. So when you have a active pandemic, when you have something which is an extraordinary event, the halacha would be considered to be a sakana, and you have to take unusual measures in order to contain the active pandemic. But when the massive, even if it's an elevated risk, then normally, but if the halacha would consider the massive to be normal, to be that we don't have any specific things, so the fact that there is some risk of the coronavirus getting around and causing some death, but if the halacha would consider it, this is a normal thing, it wouldn't be begeder hishtadlus to do unusual things like having every man, woman, and child staying home, having all businesses closed, etc. That wouldn't be considered the appropriate hishtadlus. It wouldn't be called a sakana.
So, Rabbi Aharon, I would ask like this: say wood houses, right? I mean, I know in Rahman al-San in Flatbush there was a streifa a few years ago where a family was killed. That's very sad. But we're a community of 1 million people. We're living in America now. How you're 30, 40, 50 years, and we hear a story once every 10 years, once every 5 years. Speed. I remember in Lakewood, Nebuch, when a friend of mine's wife was killed. These are like one in 100,000 type of incidents, right? The coronavirus has killed 2,000 people in the last month or so, right?
The people who got the virus, for the most part, got the virus when the virus was going around undetected, at a time where there was hundreds of chasnas every night. Purim was the way Purim was. The amount of gathering, the amount of community interaction that goes on, which is good. There's nothing wrong with it. But, on the normal times, but that's what happened, and that's what brought, it was unreal. We didn't know that the coronavirus was there until a number of people got sick, and by that time, it was kind of too late for the vast majority of the people that got it. The point is, of course, as long as the coronavirus is still around, of course, we're going to have to tone down a lot of things, large gatherings, conventions, chasanas, ball games, whatever it is, that is certainly going to take a long time until, that I think they're calling that phase 3 or phase 4 or whatever you want to call it. That of course we have to stop, and that's very appropriate. But on the other hand, we got to get on to the business of living. Children have to go to school, Bachrim have to go to yeshiva, people have to daven, people have to go to the shiur, people have to work. And the normal life, we can make a number of modifications in all of these things to make it as safe as possible. But where's the point where we say, no, there's an active pandemic and we have to take extreme measures? And when's the point to say, well, back not to totally normal, but with some mitigation, this is considered normal enough that this is already the appropriate establishment. So that takes a tremendous Aharon of the daily.
So let me take a stab at it, Rabbi Aharon. Let me take a stab at it, okay? Rabbi Kivegan, the Magid Avrohom in two places in our Chaim, right? Mm-hmm. Both, holchu b'signoi nechad, right? And they shtalavek, which is, I believe, used by the contemporary poskim, let's say, Lagabe Havdalah, it's Rabbi Kivegan, Medur Kamasim and Samach, and Magid Avrohom in Shin Tezayin, and right, and in Shin Lamed Ol Shabbos. But they say that 1 in 1,000 is called pikuach nefesh. So, for example, Hatzalah will go on a call if there's up to 1 in 1,000 chance that it could be life-threatening. If it's something that's less than 1 in 1,000, that's already Rabbi Kivegan says that doesn't rise to the level of pikuach nefesh. That's what we use.
Yeah, I think you put it as a dogma. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Continue.
So I would posit, right, that if through social distancing they can reduce, at least from this angle, if they could reduce the level of where you say, look, it's less than 1 in 1,000 that you can get seriously ill from it or die from it, right? Ill from it, etc. Then at that point, it would not rise to the level of pikuach nefesh in commonly accepted Hilchos Shabbos. Would you agree with that?
Not 100% because it's not really defined statistically. It's much harder to define it, but it's not really defined statistically. What the Halacha considers a sakana, there will be inconsistencies when you're dealing with statistics. Part of what the Halacha also deals with, what's considered normal and what's considered an abnormal situation, or what act is considered like a necessary part of living, and what act is something which is an aberration, which would be more chayshish for. I think the Neighbor Behudin is true about hunting. He mentions about discouraging hunting because it's a dangerous thing. And he said if you have a poor person, a person that needs it for Parnassah, that goes out and traps things because he needs it for Parnassah, so we're going to allow him more leeway when we're dealing with sakana, as opposed to somebody who's just doing it for a sport, and there is some danger involved. We're not going to allow even a smaller amount of danger. Now, other things come in. Also, you see,
Rabbi Aharon, can I just back up, because you're mentioning a few different acts, and I want to talk to you a little about it. One thing is you're talking about what sort of normal acceptance. We say Haidu, if you're Sfard, every Erev Shabbos, that Dalet Tzrichim L'Haides, in other words, what a Yerdei Hayam. Hey, Yerdei Ambenes, Hey Maro Maseh Hashem Noisa B'Mitzula. They went down to the water. I mean, I was in a museum once. I saw a mock-up of the Nino, the Pinto, and the Santa Maria that crossed the ocean with Columbus. And it was honestly pretty terrifying to think about crossing the ocean. These things were like the size of large rowboats. So, but yet people they crossed the Mediterranean all the time. The Rambam's brother died and everything. And we don't say that it was Asar al Pikuach Nefesh. No. And one of the reasons, there's two different reasons they give, but one of the reasons is, I believe, the Shomrei brings, something that's Minhagay Shel Olam, the Derech Hechrach, right? That's the Lashon, he's a Kadman, he's a few hundred years ago, I shouldn't say a Kadman, but an earlier, he says, Ein Lachash, the world has to go on, right? It's Derech Olam. No, but I would just wonder whether, post-pandemic, 2 months of pandemic, I'm not sure what Derech Olam is. I mean, we're sort of tapping in the dark, trying to create
a question I can't give a psak on. Whether we consider that there's a terrible pandemic going on, a global crisis, which we have to put all our strength into mitigating as much as possible at this point, or do we say no? You know what I'm saying? Disease, it's an elevated level of disease, and we have to respond to it. But we can't treat it that way. That's the question of Shikol Adas that you need Psak would have to come from the Gedolei Hadar, or, definitely with a lot of Yishuv Adas. I'm just discussing in general.
So, Rabbi, I'm struggling with, and this is maybe what you're referring to. On one hand, Lagabe Shabbos, we say 1 in 1,000 rises the Pikuach Nefesh, right? And yet, by Derech HaOlam, like taking a boat across the Mediterranean, I would argue that the danger is probably a lot more than 1 in 1,000.
Right. Definitely
right?
possible.
And yet Derech HaOlam seemed to be matter it. So it seems almost like
I was saying. That's why I couldn't. That's why there's going to be some inconsistency when you're dealing with statistics. I'll tell you an interesting thing from Rav Moshe, and the Chazon Ish said a very similar thing. Rav Moshe was discussing a very shver Magen Avrohom that says that the reason why people allow themselves to go, the Halacha says you can't go on a ship 3 days before Shabbos because you have to start thinking about Shabbos. And you might have to be Shabbos. You might have to be Mechal Shabbos on the ship. So you're not allowed to go 3 days before Shabbos. But the Halacha, right.
Yeah.
Right. So the Magen Avrohom says that people don't keep this halacha. They go on ships even 3 days before Shabbos. That was the minute. And that's why they make sure to be Mesaken Atzmam and not be Mechal Shabbos when things come up on the ship. Which sounds very fair. It sounds like they're being Yosef al-Chatam Pesha. It sounds like they're doing worse. Here they're going 3 days before Shabbos, and then when something comes up, they're not Mechal Shabbos when it's a Sakana. What does this Magen Avrohom mean? And Rav Moshe was very anti the pshat that if you brought the Sakana to yourself, you can't be Mechal Shabbos. He says, Allah is not that way. It makes no difference. If it's a Sakana, you can be Mechal Shabbos. But he said that the pshat is like this. Whether it's called a Sakana, that you have to be Mechal Shabbos, really depends on the subjective interpretation of the person. It's not an objective thing. If a person thinks it's a sakana, and we're not dealing with everything, but you have these cases which are gray, and if a person thinks it's a sakana, we do allow him to Mechal Shabbos. If by him he doesn't see it as a sakana, then he does not Mechal Shabbos. And he says what the Magen Avrohom is saying is that the people who might consider it sakana, but since that would answer them from going on the ship 3 days before Shabbos, so they kind of strengthen themselves over their emotion, and they don't consider it a sakana. Chazon Ish also said pretty similar, that a lot of times, when you have a thing that's hard to call, it really depends on the person. If by him, such a thing is a sakana, he's a very cautious person, he's a nervous type, he's not clear, he's not comfortable, fine. As long as, again, you can't do it when there's absolutely no sakana, when there's very little, but as long as it's one of these gray areas, so okay, he doesn't consider this minhag sh'olam. For him, he's very uncomfortable with it. He's allowed to be Mechal Shabbos. Shanking someone else, well, by him, this is not a sakana. This is daily living. This is the way we work. Right? Now, there are things that are sakana no matter what, and if you don't think it is, it's but l'daita it's a kaladam. There are things that are certainly not a sakana, and if you're nervous, so then also about l'daita, take an anxiety pill. But there are many things that are gray, which this is the chiddush of Rav Moshe and the Chazon Ish. It depends on the perception of the individual person. But it certainly also depends on the perception of society. It's going on the ship, on a rickety ship, in this society is a normal thing because that's the ships they have and travel had to be done. So they don't consider it sakana. They consider it as normal. In normal life, things happen. But that's what it's considered. And that's how the halacha considers it. If by us we would go on such a ship, it would be a sakana because we have better ships. So, the same thing with the houses. We don't have to go so extreme to have houses of steel and metal, but the houses that they had in the previous times, we'd say that's a fire hazard, and you shouldn't be living in such a house. You should make sure to take the appropriate safeguards. You know what I'm saying? But by them, that's what
for Aharon. So what's your what are you trying? What's the conclusion you're trying to draw?
No. So what I'm saying is that I'm saying one thing. I'm saying the shaila depends on the shaila. The way I see what the shaila depends on is if we're looking at the pandemic as an aberration, as something which is a not normal thing, a magefa that's coming, that would require extreme measures. And everyone would be mechayev to do the extreme measures, and that would be considered a sakana. But if this, when it reaches the point where you say, no, this is life, yes, it's an elevated measure, so we have to do at least some mitigation or a lot of mitigation, but it's just impractical for long term to keep people home. People have to work, the economy has to run, and it's not only, just to become rich and prosperous. I mean, you need food and health care to survive, and for food and health care you need money, and for money you need an economy.
So a new normal, so you're saying it becomes a new normal.
Yeah.
And after taking proper distancing, but there is going to be a heightened element of risk, but certainly not to the level where it was a pandemic as before.
You're definitely going to come to a point where, whether do we come to the point yet? When is it, and how to figure it out? Can't give a psak on it. You need the shikol and das of
Okay.
Of the
Let me ask you another question, Aharon. People say something like, the supermarket is open, right? So if the supermarket is open, the shuls should be open. And I struggle with that. I've heard this from quite a number of rabbanim, and to me, and I would like to hear your opinion on it. The Gemara at the end of Bava Metzia says on the Posek, so the Gemara says that a person is allowed to in other words, you can put your life in some element of risk, right? Not a direct risk, to earn a living. And based on this, I wrote a letter years ago. I actually printed it in one of the headlines to a number of Rabbanim in Yisroel, of Zilberstein. I don't remember who the others were. And I asked them, I said, a doctor whose expertise is in virology, can he treat Ebola victims because of the fact that he's putting himself in danger? And they both responded. They also said, means that for Parnassah, you can take a heightened element of risk. And I would say the svara to it is, because if you don't have a Parnassah, you could die of hunger. So, it's less risk than you would take if you didn't have Parnassah. That's, to me, it's not like a blundig zeres hakasa, but there's a svara to it, right? So they said yes, so the doctor, this is what he's trained in, this is what he has to do. So when asked by people, they said, if you go to the supermarket, why can't you go to Shul? I said, listen, people have to eat, right? There's just if you don't eat, you're going to die, right? Right? Clearly, if you get food delivered, it's great, but someplace you can't. So you have to do basic kind of things. But Shul, it's not something that you're going to die. In fact, it's you can daven at home just as easily. Yes, it's more mechubed, etc., but it's not a necessity, and therefore the level of how much risk we can take is chaluk for malacha than for a mitzvah, certainly a mitzvah draban or whatever. Would you agree with that or not?
Right. I'd agree that it could be chaluk, but I would also say the problem a little bit here is that we went a little bit from one extreme to another extreme. When you have a shul which services hundreds or some even thousands of people a day, davening in close proximity, socializing, and that definitely was a major cause of the spread of the virus. 26%. 26%
is what the
community of that. And that, of course, at the time of the pandemic had to be stopped. But to go then make private minyanim where people will maintain social distance, particularly if you say that they should wear masks like they do in Eretz Yisrael, that seems to me that would be appropriate at this time. You know what I'm saying? That's the...
But I asked Rabbi Genack this shaila. So if you're my Rav and I would ask you this shaila, I would say, we want to make a minyan in the backyard, which we want to do, by the way, for Shavuos. I would like to make a minyan, right, for Kabbalah HaTorah. And we're all going to stand 6 feet apart. We're going to make markers on the ground. And we're going to have somebody's Emunah to scream at people not to. On the other hand, the CDC on this site says they now believe that the droplets in the air can fly as far as, I think it was 18 feet or 19 feet, and it could stay suspended. And I saw it this morning. I'm not as old, I apologize. They thought it was for 30 seconds. It could stay suspended in the air for as long as 10 or 15 minutes. And I came to you and I said, Rabbi Aharon, we want to make a minyan. The CDC doesn't know. But if this Shas is right, somebody may die. There's actually a shul in my neighborhood that has been having secret minyanim for straight through it. And a guy who davens, his wife died, came home with it, killed his wife. Right? So if I would ask you, can we or can't we make this minyan without masks, would you say we can or we can't?
It's, again, I don't want to give a definitive fact on such a broad range question in such an extent. I'm saying. But the way it goes into the discussion we had before, there is a difference, I think, when the disease was running rampant and, and it was just, spreading by the day and something had to be done, to now when seemingly it's much more under control. There's definitely a difference. And there's also a difference between the way minyanim run in a normal thing, which is, again, it's fine. It's just not fine for the corona epidemic. But it's, and having a minyan with the type of mitigation that you need. Like you're saying, and this is a bit the argument about the grocery store. I'm saying, and it's more than the grocery store. Neighbors are going out. Now, again, there are people that seemingly are not keeping the regular social distancing rules that are still in place. And I would think that that's wrong. But even you're talking about the 19 feet away, neighbors definitely talk to each other at a distance of 6 or 8 feet away or 10 feet away or whatever it is. And people walk the streets and people do exercise. And all this is important and all this is really hechrech. And it's all minhag shalom. People cannot stay home. It's a dangerous thing. And the chances of any one type of thing is actually very minimal. It's more the cumulative effect. And therefore, to me, it seems that the time has come to allow to start, for Klal Yisrael to start. And, Eretz Yisrael is a different story. The pandemic was much, much, much less in Eretz Yisrael. That's what they're doing in Eretz Yisrael. It could be the minyanim should be done with masks. But to me, it seems that people are already talking, that the time has come to not to have the minyanim, not to have the minyanim the way they were done before, not to have hundreds and hundreds and perhaps even thousands of people in the same minyan, or even tens of people without any type of mitigation. But with the appropriate mitigation, it would seem that the time is right for that. But again, it's up to the Gdei and Posek to give that back.
Okay, now what do you say to the following svara? You had mentioned a heter of which again certain poskim bring. Sure, Shlomo Zalman also brings it, but the first I saw it is human hagay shalayla Menachach. You think life has to go on? What would you say to the following argument that the president is looking at the country, or any government is looking, and they're saying, look, the pandemic was going to kill a lot of people. We thought it would pass. This is what's coming out of the White House. And at this point, even if a few million Americans die, right, more will die if we close down the country. Right? So it's basically a question of weighing how many deaths we have this way and how many deaths we have the other way. That seems to be sort of the nusach coming out of the White House, something like that. Not exactly Shachar Gabi Lovan, but basically saying the cure is greater than the disease. We're saving, so let a few million Americans die, but the other 300 million Americans will have, at the end of the day, will be thing. And I'm curious, it sounds on one hand very radical, but on the other hand, I have a raya from the Gemara that it's not as radical as we think, and that is that the Gemara says in a few places that they came to David HaMelech, and they said, Ein habar nismale b'chol yasei. He says, go to war, and what does it say? Yedechem b'gdud, go capture, and wars. People die in wars. In fact, the Gemara says that a melech could make a mochamis rishus, where up to a sixth of the soldiers die, which is 16%. But it would seem that a melech or a government has the right to actually weigh this and say, listen, you close down the country, you close down the economy, it'll cause a far greater death than the number of people who will. I mean, is the Gemara sort of a riot to this train of thought that the president is thinking?
It's hard to bring riots for myself like that. I think I once saw one shot in the Gemara. Again, I would have to look to see exactly that Mrs. David HaMelech was supposed to make wars against Ammon and Ohev and the neighboring countries, and that was his job of it, to conquer, the whole Eretz Yisrael and surrounding areas. Shlomo HaMelech was the one that was supposed to just have a peace and everyone tributated to him, and David was the warrior. And the Parnassah thing was kind of a heavenly message that now's the time. So then it wouldn't be a riot. But I don't remember if this chat is
but the Gemara also says that a melech could make a milchemes rishus, where up to a sixth of the people get killed.
Yeah,
it's not referring to David. That's referring to a general.
It's hard to know. You know what I'm saying. This also goes into the idea that a country has to have a military and has to be able to make wars, and that's how a country needs for functioning. And yes, people will die, but people die in normal social living. It does go into it, but exactly where to how to apply it would be
obviously. So let me ask you another question. For a mitzvah, how much risk is a person allowed to undertake for the purposes of a mitzvah? So I want to go daven, and I'm on the other side of a river. On the other side is a minyan, and I have a rowboat, and the channel is moving pretty quickly, and there's an element of danger. I mean, how much? If I take the boat and I drown, I mean, would you say, or I made it across? Would you say, it's a mitzvah b'avera? Don't put your life at risk to make a minyan.
Clear sakana, you're not allowed to. But the point is, like we said, sakana has other guidelines that go into it. Minhag shel and the hechrich also, like we said, like you were mentioning, hechrich also goes into it. Mitzvah is also a cheshbon. There are certain things that would not be allowed to do if it wouldn't be for a mitzvah. But when it comes to a mitzvah, we say the shema mitzvah le'eded avera, and you would be allowed to do it. Certain amount of sakana, I'm saying, not a large amount, that would be clearly usher even for a mitzvah, but it's a small amount of sakana.
Right.
Sometimes we say that, the Gemara says shulchem mitzvah nizaykim, the Gemara says heicha d'sheicha zayka shani, you have to take the appropriate precautions. But when you are dealing with a mitzvah, you are definitely allowed a little bit more leeway.
So here's my question. The Gemara, like you said, the Gemara Pesachim says, "Heicha d'shchiach hazeka shani." So the gather of what's called shchiach hazeka is accepted commonly, I believe. I think it's a Mishkinas Yankif who says it's more than 10% is called shchiach hazeka. So Rabbi Yashiv, interestingly, said, I'm just saying, Rabbi Yashiv said, and how much is called lo shchiach hazeka? He said 10% is shchiach hazeka. If it's more than 10, what's lo shchiach? He says if it's less than 5, he has a few rayas to it. It's called lo shchiach hazeka, less than 5%. So here's my question: If somebody could daven in a minyan, right, and you would say, listen, there's less than 5% that you could get really sick. You would say maybe it's the mitzvah's matzel.
Really?
I mean, is that what?
Really
Hatzalah comes to up to 1 in 1,000, but you could take a 5% chance of risk of crossing the river and dying. Help me. That's what I needed. Help me through this.
The halacha doesn't depend on statistics. It depends on other things which are a lot harder to define. You know what I'm saying? You need a lot of shikol adas for it. You know what I'm saying? It's a matter of the perceived sakana, like we discussed. It's a matter of what society considers a sakana, what the person considers a sakana. And it's also tempered by the hechrich and the minhag shleilam. It's not only statistics statistics make a difference. I'm saying how much statistically the sakana makes a difference, but that's not the real kadeya.
So in closing, Rabbi Aharon, let me ask you in closing. Would you feel comfortable allowing your family to daven in an indoor minyan, right, where there was 6 feet distancing between people, right? And it was in an area unfortunately, most of the frum areas have had a high, in Kansas, there's not a lot of, in Samoa, there's not a single case. And now we've had a lot of incidents of it, saying, well, go daven Shavuos, in whatever the big shul is in Detroit, everybody's standing 6 feet away from each other, and maybe if it was a child, you would be able to, but would you be comfortable sending, your I don't know if you have uncles, aunts, etc.
Well, that's a question about people who are at high risk of dying from it. That they definitely have to take more steps to protect themselves than people who are in a lower risk. That's for sure. And that's going to be an issue when society opens up, so to speak, and the CDC is going to say, yeah, but not the people that are over a certain age, perhaps they'll say 60, perhaps 80, I don't know, and not for people that have underlying health conditions, which a lot of people have asthma and diabetes and Crohn's disease and, all sorts of things. And it's going to be very difficult for them to stay at home cooped up, particularly when everything is going on, and how to deal with when they do come to shul, etc., would be a challenge. But when I personally feel comfortable, I would feel comfortable. I would want a psak from the Rabbanim if that's what's appropriate now. To me it seems at least.
Would you wear a mask or no?
I think so. I think that would be. I think wearing a mask would be an appropriate precaution. Yeah, I do think so. I'm saying it's hard to stay away from the entire time, and also, like you said, that don't necessarily work. I think wearing a mask would be the appropriate precaution. That's really what they're doing in Eretz Yisrael now. The minyanim are. I don't know if they went inside yet. I'm saying, but people are davening with the minyan, and I think they did. I think they went inside, but people are wearing masks, and if you don't come with the mask, there's going to be some people in the shul that are going to ask you why. That's what seems to be becoming the norm. With masks, if nobody wears them, then no one's going to be able to wear them. If everybody wears them, I think everybody will be able to wear them, and I would encourage that.
It sounds like it's going to be quite complicated, no?
Yeah, it is. It is. Very big challenge. Yeah, the Ohev should have Rachmanis, and bring us back again, however it is, the yeshivas, the bachrim, we need yeshivas, the kids, they need schools, and we need shuls, we need that family, we need the personal that family share, the phone and the Zoom is okay, but, when the Ohev gives it back to us, we have to learn to appreciate it.
Amen.
That's the insane.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Rabbi, for your time. We always appreciate having you on. Kultov, take care. Bye-bye. Joining us is Harav Menachen Genack. He is the CEO, the head of the OU, which means everybody listening to this program, the saimach on him for that the achila should be b'kedusha b'tahara. Rambam brings machalas asuras and sefer kedusha. But everybody, no matter what hechsha, relies on the OU and his psakim. He's also the Rav of Shomrei Emunah. He's Mechaber Sefarim Birchas Yitzchak and Sheishanim. He's the Musmach of Rabbi Yosef Soloveitchik, Untitled Chapter. Welcome, Reb Menachen.
Welcome, Reb David.
So, at some point, minyanim are opening. I see the OU gave guidelines for opening minyanim with social distancing, etc. So I haven't been, unfortunately, in my neighborhood, there's no porch minyanim. So we don't have that opportunity. I haven't been by a minyan in a Shabbos, unfortunately, since Purim. I'm doing what the Halacha requires. But first Shabbos we go back. Are we going to lane like 7 parshas or 8 parshas? What is the Rav's opinion?
Also, there are actually many different opinions about that. There are poskim who say that all that's required is to lane the last week's parsha to make up. The chatchila would be better to make up all the parshas, but since we've been out for so many weeks now, more than 2 months, it's going to be hard to make up all the parshas if we begin right away. Hershel Shechter suggested that the procedure should be that they should lane the regular parsha, and then they can make up each week if they want, they can make up for the maftir, one of the parshas that they missed. But then, of course, the HaTorah will have to be adjusted to the parsha that they're making it up, because the HaTorah follows the theme of the maftir. So that's a possibility. I'm told a story that once Rabban, I'm not sure how authentic it is, that Rabban Kotler had come back from Eretz Yisrael or whatever it was, but he missed the parsha, and in Lakewood he took even though he wasn't a Cohen, he took the first Aliyah, like Rav, the Kanid Yisrael Kaifile, so it's Godel Hador, and he read, they added an addition to the parsha that he missed. I'm not sure, I heard the story, I don't know how authentic it is, but there is a machlokes in general. If a parsha is missed, but then you have to make it up. There are poskim that say if there are no shuls functioning, that there's no tzibur, so then there's no chiyuv tzibur to even make up the parsha.
So Rabbi Menachen, the first one who I believe asked this question was Rabbi Yitzchak of Vienna. Rabbi Yitzchak Mivin, the Balar Zarua, right?
Correct.
And it's funny, when you look at his psak, he seems to say, I'll read it exactly. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu niskan likreis HaTorah b'parshiyei sel lahashlima b'chol shana v'shana, and to complete it, kidei lahashmiya la'am mitzvahs uchukim. Right? And he says, Ve'ein lecha loimer kiven she'avar zman kriyasa holcha la'isa parsha. Moshe didn't make which parsha to read which week. So he says, so if you missed one, he seems to say make it up and finish the Torah, which certainly the pashtus of his lashon would seem to imply you should make up all the missing parshas. Even though later on it's a little bit unclear. But it's interesting, the first one to quote him after this is the Mari Mintz, who lived around, 150 years later. And he says, no, you only do one parsha, you only do 2 parshas, but not 3. But there's no Gemaras about this. Am I correct?
Correct.
I had a little bit of a laugh. If you look at the Mari Mintz who brings it, he says the story. They called somebody up to be Oila, and he got into a whole fight. He didn't want that Aliyah, and they fought for 2 hours, and the whole Oilam left. And it sounds like something that could happen today. I mean, this is the Mari Mintz lived in the 1400s. So how things stay the same, the politic and which aliyah to get, seems nothing has changed, right?
Right. Some things stay the same.
Some things stay the same. But in Shulchan Aruch, the only thing that's brought, the Ramah just says, you just do the Ramah and Kuf Lamed Heim, Batlu Shabbos Echas, right? Shabbos Haba Koyrin Oisa in Parsha Shayechas Laisa Parsha. He brings Darzura, and he doesn't mention anything about prior Shabbos, prior Sifs. I guess it was very uncommon to miss 3 or 4, right?
Right.
So that's and then we have a machlokes. The Magen Avram says that you only lane 2, you never lane 3, and the Leo Rabbah brings Dar Zarua. No, and he says as well. So the Aruch HaShulchan, the Leo Rabbah seem to say you do 3, like you said. It's a machlokes. The Magen Avram says no, you only do 2. The Mishnah Berurah is the stopik. I mean that's sort of the. There's actually a Ma'aseh HaGra, even though the Gra in Shulchan Aruch says in Batlei, and he brings the Mechaber. He says K'may b'tefillah. So the Mishnah Berurah says, oh, tefillah is only you only mashlim one davening, you don't mashlim 2. Right. But in the Ma'aseh Rav, there's a story. He says Kishayatza HaGra mi beis ha'asurim kara lebal koira sheyikra lefanav kol arba sedreis me'arba shavuos hashayashav. So we do have a Ma'aseh Rav that seems to say, and the Ma'aseh Rav is a Makubal D'Kasef, I believe, no?
Yes, 100%.
So it says you do. So you're saying it's a machlokes. So what are they going to do in your shul? So, but wait, before that, Menachen, you also mentioned another shaila, whether it's a chayvas tzibur or chayvas yachid. Could you explain that?
Well, in general, there's a question about Krias HaTorah. Is that an obligation of the tzibur or the obligation of the yachid? So let me just to broaden it. This I heard from the Rav. Reb Chaim Brisker, his grandfather, famously thought that Krias HaTorah was a chovas yachid, was an obligation of the yachid. The implementation required a tzibur. But every yachid is obligated to hear Krias HaTorah. And on the contrary, tefillah b'tzibur, it's only a chovas tzibur. It's a maila. If there's a tzibur davening, to say kaddish and kedusha and to daven b'tzibur. So Reb Chaim, his minhag was that he would, and I remember Soloveitchik do this as well. If he missed it, he would never miss a Krias HaTorah. But the famous Reb Chaim would get off a train to make sure to go to a shul, to get a tzibur together, to daven, to get not for the davening, the tefillah b'tzibur he wasn't so makbid about, but he was very makbid about Krias HaTorah. And the Rav told this wonderful story. He said that his other grandfather, Reb Eli Pruzhner, Reb Eliyahu Feinstein of Prushen, once was the Rav describing his grandfather as a man. He said he knew Kol HaTorah Kula by heart. He remembers once he was learning at night, and by candlelight, and the flame went out, and he just continued learning the Gemara by heart. So he said that when the Rav was a little boy, he told him, he said, Ich verstehe nicht auf andere Seite. I don't understand your other grandfather, namely Reb Chaim. He says, and tefillah b'tzibur, he's so careless. And tefillah b'tzibur is a completely different tefillah. Tefillah b'tzibur, tefillah b'tzibur is always nishmas. And Krias HaTorah, he makes such a tumult about. And then he said, Ich habe ihm gewissen a mefurish Ramban. I showed him an explicit Ramban that says that Krias HaTorah is a chovas tzibur, not a chovas yachid. And then he paused and he said, oh, but you can't understand it, but you know your other grandfather, mit sein eiserne Ivra, with his ironclad categories and language, nochten was gelernt Ramban gehalten where halt. After the way he interpreted the Ramban holds like him. And then he paused and he said, oh, but ich bin von the Yidden from Matan Torah. So, sort of smiley. But I'm from the Jews before Matan Torah, before Reb Chaim's new Brisker Derech. So, but Reb Chaim thought it was a Chovas Yachid, and Reb Eli Pruzhner thought it was only a Chovas Tzibur. And the Rav said later that his grandfather didn't tell him which Ramban he was referencing, but later he told them.
Gimel and Megillah, no?
Megillah, he said, that the Rav said later that I found on my own, exactly what you called it, the Ramban and the Milchamis. The Ramban, to answer the Balamor's question, the Balamor, the Rif says that Krias Megillah, Shelo Bizmana, requires Asara, requires 10, requires a minyan. And the Balamor disagrees, and he says if that were true, it should be cited in the Mishnah and Megillah that lists all the things that require Asara, Paris al-Shema, and so on, and Krias HaTorah, but Megillah is not counted. So the Ramban answers that Krias Megillah is a chova, that Krias Megillah is a chova on the Yochid, just because of Pirsume Nisa, it requires Asara to fulfill the mitzvah, as opposed to all the other things in the Mishnah, as opposed to the things that are mentioned in the Mishnah, those are a chovas tzibur, and that's why Megillah is not included. But you see from the Ramban, since Krias HaTorah indeed is mentioned in the Mishnah, that Krias HaTorah is a chovas tzibur. And Moshe Shmuel Shapira, Sechet Tzadik Levracha, said that his grandfather, the Befol Shapira, who was Reb Chaim's father-in-law and the Nitziv's son-in-law, when Reb Chaim, and they lived one house, they lived in Volozhin, one on top of the other. And Reb Chaim was missing, he put together his minyan in the afternoon, whatever it was, for his Krias HaTorah. They were missing one, and he wanted Befol Shapira to come to hear Krias HaTorah, to make up the minyan for them. And Befol Shapira said, I'm not coming. It's a chovas tzibur, enough with the Meshugas, there's no chiyuv, and he wouldn't come. And Moshe Shmuel said, das given einer von der Machlokes in Volozhin and Brisk. This is one of the distinctions between Volozhin and Brisk. But Reb Chaim held that Krias HaTorah is a chovas yachid, and therefore you're obligated to hear Krias HaTorah. Whether I should just add, just in terms of what you said, even according to Reb Chaim, that Krias HaTorah is a chovas yachid, offhand the Krias HaTorah is to hear Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos, but to hear, to make up the chova, to hear that the Torah should be read the entire Torah over the course of the year, that offhand is only a chova on the tzibur. That's not a chova on the yochid. But Rav Chaim, I'll just share a story I heard from the Rav once. The Rav said that Rav Chaim was once, it's a funny story, he said it was in Vilna. He had not heard Krias HaTorah, so he went to a shul, he put together a minyan, and then he asked, is there anybody here who knows how to read the Torah? So one old man raises his hand, he approaches the Torah, they open up the Torah, it's about to lane, he puts on his glasses, and he says, oh, das ist unkudos. Oh, this is without the punctuation, the kudos. It's a story that the Rabbi would love to tell.
Uh-huh.
But Chaim famously thought it was a Chovas Yochid. It's interesting the way you cited the Ozarua, the Ozarua quoting from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, but often the Chiyuv for Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't to hear the entire Torah. That Chiyuv was Chiyuv Kodesh Ezra, even and for this 1 year, 3 years, Mitigate Yisroel was every 3 years. But the Ozarua, the way you cited it, says it for Moshe Rabbeinu, even to hear the entire Torah, because Moshe only had one aliyah, or 3 psukim, or 3 oilim with 3 psukim.
Right.
The expansion of it was Ezra, but that was maybe a Shiur de Lishna.
Right. Well, that's what I quoted him literally verbatim.
Right.
Yeah, but you're right. The Gemara says, "Shoyelchu gimel yamim b'lei Torah." That's what it says, right? Yeah.
Right.
So, what are you going to do in your shul, Rav Genack?
So I'm hoping that we'll get this soon, but it's not something soon to get to. I think just first of all, in terms of security reasons, initially we're going to try to make the davening as short when we get back, as short as possible. That's what the Rabbonim here in Bergen County have been talking about. I have to give them a lot of credit. They've closed down the shuls very early with really a lot of alacrity, and because of that, we see less of an instance of the corona, though there have been terrible cases in some shuls, but it's certainly much less that we've seen in other from communities, and that's because they closed it down and they haven't permitted any minyan, even back, individual minyan in backyards. But we're approaching that time. It seems probably sometime in June, but the minyanim will be very limited. They're going to limit to the number of people and just on the physical space required of the social distancing 6 or 8 feet. And maybe initially they'll try to do it outdoors, not indoors, because there's more ventilation. So I think just on a practical level, to try to make up all these months that we've missed of Krias HaTorah is going to be difficult, because then that will extend the davening, at least initially, or over the course of time, for a very long time. And one of the things we want to do, just for the security reason and the health issues, is to make the minyan, as not as short as possible, but not to extend it. So
you're going to go like the other opinion of the Mishnah Berurah that says not to do it, Pashut, because of the danger element involved, security element involved.
I don't think the RCP's made a final decision about it, but I know it's one of their considerations.
So let me ask you a question. Let me go off topic and talk about, since you're the head of the OU, and a lot of Yiddishkeit follows the OU's psukim, and admirably so. Like you say, Bergen County came out and they shut down the minyanim right away, even before Purim. And whereas in Borough Park, Flatbush, there have been, according to the Chevra Kadisha, 2,000 deaths, which is an astronomical number when you think of it. There have been 80,000 deaths in the United States that has 330 million people, and 2,000 deaths in Borough Park and Williamsburg that has 300,000 people, which means it's a 80x death in the Orthodox community. But Bergen County escaped that bullet because of the Rabbonim, the Das Torah of Bergen County. But here's my question. Rabbi Kivegan, the Magen Avram, famously cites...
I just want to say, it's not that we were completely exempt. There were deaths, tragically, but the number, as compared to these other communities, is dramatically less.
Yeah. So here's my question to you. Rabbi Kivega and the Magen Avram famously cite in two different, in the Drush V'Chiddush, and Magen Avram is twice in Shulchan Aruch, that what's considered 1 in 1,000 for Shabbos, Yimachal Shabbos. So Hatzalah will come on anything that's up to 1 in 1,000. Somebody says, my kid fell. What? He cut himself. Look, there's more than 1 in 1,000. It could be a vein that could be life-threatening. So they run. Right? 1 in 1,000. More than 1 in 1,000. Rabbi Kiva says, no, that's not already called Dover. That's not called Sakan anymore. So here's my question. The CDC, as recently as this week, or on their site, they cite that they don't know how long droplets last in the air. They thought it's only 6 feet, and it only lasts for like a minute. Now research says is that if the person spoke in a very loud voice and he projected, then the droplet could stay in the air for up to 14 minutes. And there's another opinion that it says it's not 6 feet, but it could be as far as 20 feet. So given all that, to me, I would say, if we're Machal Shabbos on 1 in 1,000, right, in other words, that's considered Pikuach Nefesh. To me, it would be considered L'chayra Pikuach Nefesh. If that's Pikuach Nefesh, you should juxtapose that to our situation. And there is a 1 in 1,000 chance, certainly much greater, that it could stay in the air for more than a few seconds, that it could project more than 6 feet, and therefore we are putting people's lives at risk. In fact, there's a Rav near me, a rebel near me, who kept his shul open during the whole crisis. He thought he was doing a mitzvah. And then I know one of his mispalim's wife died. This guy came home with COVID from davening tefillah b'tzibur, and he killed his wife. This Rebbe killed this guy's wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my question is if you have such a Magen Avraham and Rabbi Kivega, and we know so little, how do we open the shuls given those facts?
I'll tell you the truth. Your question is a very good question. I want to just broaden it, just in terms of the attitude that we have to take in terms of these issues of shakonas nefashos, pikuach nefesh. There's a story. I actually said it over recently in Daf Yomi because in Shabbos we learned some halachas of pikuach nefesh, and I saw that Meir Twersky, his grandson, told over the story. But I heard this from the Rav directly. He said that when he was a little boy, I think it might have even been a baby, I don't know at what age, but very young, he was sick, very, very sick. And the doctor came to examine him. It was on Shabbos. And Reb Chaim, as the doctor was examining him, so Reb Chaim said, maybe you need more light. So the doctor said, no, maybe. So he told Reb Monsey Soloveitchik, his father, he said, put on the light. He froze. He said, Shabbos. Reb Chaim said, I'm Horitz. And he told Reb Simcha Zelig to put on the light. And everybody famously knows that Reb Chaim, when it came to Pikuach Nefesh, he was very, people used to complain that he was makel about Shabbos. So Reb Chaim famously responded, it's not that I'm makel about Shabbos, it's that I'm a machmir about Pikuach Nefesh. And there's another girsa that Reb Chaim said, it's not that I'm a makel about Shabbos, it's that I'm a machmir about Ritzicha, Shvichas Damim. So, I don't know. I did hear recently what you said, and I think it's something that people in consultation with doctors and so on, maybe it's something they should think about. I don't know. I just can tell you another story related to that. When the Rabbi used to tell this, he said when his father, the Moshe, got his first rabbanus, which was in Rasain, so he said Reb Chaim told him, in terms of the job of a Rav, there were several things he told him. He said some he can share with us and some he can't. But he said two of the things he shared with us was this. One was that, first of all, in terms of what's the job of a Rav, he said the job of a Rav is to do chesed, to take care of the indigent, the people who are most vulnerable in society, the Almala, the Yosem. That's the job of the Rav. And everybody knows that Reb Chaim's house was completely open to the most vulnerable people or the most isolated people, a young girl who not married, who had a child. Reb Chaim would take care of the baby, make sure that the baby had a nurse, a wet nurse to feed the baby. This was Reb Chaim Brisker. The other thing he told Reb Moshe was that when it comes to a choyle sheyesh bo sakana on Yom Kippur, don't feed him pachos with make a shear. You should feed him the full shear, because he's a choyle sheyesh bo sakana. And Brisker Rav in his sefer, in his letters in the back, quotes this psak from Reb Chaim. It seems to be against the psak, the explicit psak of the Shulchan Aruch, and even the general minhag ha'olam. And so Velvel explains that Reb Chaim held that a choyle sheyesh bo sakana osim lo kol tzarko. So that was what Avrohom was based on. So Kol Tzorko means that he should eat normally, not that he has to be limited in what he can eat. And therefore he would feed him Kol Tzorko. And so in terms of the Shulchan Aruch, Avrohom said, this is how Rabbi explains, that's speaking about that he wasn't yet a choila. But if he doesn't eat, he has a heart condition. He's not right now a chola sheyesh bo sakana. If he fasts completely, it could come to sakana. So then you can feed him pochus kashir, so it doesn't come to the sakana. But if he's already a chola sheyesh bo sakana, he's in the hospital or whatever the condition is. He's a cancer. In terms of then you don't give him pochus kashir. You give him the full share. But I mentioned the stories because Avrohom thought this is fundamental. Issues of pikuach nefesh are fundamental to the responsibility of a Rav and of leaders, more broadly of leaders in community. And all of these issues in terms of pikuach nefesh have to take precedence over everything else. I know we had meetings the other day, the RCBC. Obviously, sometimes there are different opinions within the Rabbanim, but to their credit, they came together with one unanimous position, and no one is allowed to veer away from it. And there's no question that it saved people within the community. So if the number is not 6 feet but 8 feet, then or whatever the number is, then those are things that should be really calculated. I don't know, and maybe they should wait longer.
Rabbi Genack, let me ask you a question. A woman asked me this question. She said, story in the Gemara of Rabbi Akiva with the foxes. There was the fish in the pond, and fox said, "Why don't you come to the land?" So they were running away from a fisherman. He says, the fox said to the fish, "Come up to the land." So they said, "You're supposed to be the wisest of the animal. The water is in the water where we could live, and land will die. We'd rather be in the water with a fisherman chasing us." So therefore Rabbi Akiva said, "I taught Torah even during the Romans, because the Torah is our water. We can't breathe without it." So she said, "You see, Yidden have been Moshe Nefesh forever to learn, and she added, and to daven. So now the coronavirus is here. Why don't we say you should be Moshe Nefesh for it? What's the chiluk between Corona and that Gemara?" That's what she asked me.
Right. So the answer is Rabbi Akiva was a Sash Hashmad in terms of, so to defy the Romans, learning Torah, he thought, and it's only Rabbi Akiva that would preserve Torah, but it's different than simply not being careful, pikuach nefesh, in terms of not getting infected or whatever other reason. Rabbi Akiva was unique in what he represented in terms of Torah. You mentioned Rabbi Akiva. Can I just tell you a story, because I think it's relevant to our discussion? I actually have this in my book, the letters I sent to President Clinton, but I think it's relevant to what we're talking about. It's something I heard from the Rav, and I sent this missive to him, and he responded to me. But we know we just celebrated Lag BaOmer. So the Rav said, what is it that Lag BaOmer represents? So this is really the Pri Chodesh gives this answer as well. But he said, we know the Gemara tells us that over this period of time, 24,000 of Akiva's disciples died, presumably in a plague. The Rav thought maybe not a plague, maybe it wasn't. The plague is just a metaphor for the battle against Rome, and they were killed in the Bar Kokhba rebellion. But let's presume, does Rav Hai Gaon say that?
There's a letter for Rav Hai Gaon that intimates that, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know.
I'll send it to you afterwards, yeah.
But here we have an ancient plague, and we're living through that kind of plague, now potentially. So look at the leadership. The Rav said, "What do we celebrate about Lag BaOmer?" He said, because the Gemara says in Yavamis that Rabbi Akiva then went to the Dorim, and he found 5 Talmidim, Rabbi Elazar and others, the great Tanoim, with which he rebuilt Torah. And that's Rabbi Akiva. What we celebrate is Rabbi Akiva's indomitable faith. Even in the worst of times, everything in front of him was ashes. His life's work destroyed. All his Talmidim dead. Where will be the next generation? But what we celebrate is Rabbi Akiva's indomitable faith. And we see it, as the Gemara says at the end of Makos, that when Rabbi Akiva came with the other Chachamim, and he saw, you mentioned the fox before, a fox going out of the cut that was once the Kodesh Kadashim, And all the Chachomim began to cry. And Rabbi Kiva, the Gemara tells us there, Marcus began to laugh. And they asked him, upon seeing a scene of such desolation, how can you laugh? And he said, how can you cry? He said, just as the nevuah of the Churban, it now has been so completely fulfilled, so will the nevuah of Zechariah, that ultimately Yerushalayim will be rebuilt and filled with laughter. So that was Rabbi Kiva, the man of faith and optimism. And that's what he brought. Even in this time of plague, after everything was lost, he saw the potential to rebuild. So, as we conclude, we should think about Rabbi Kiva also in terms of his optimism, even though we're living in really, this is a once in a century catastrophe. Last time was the Spanish flu, but in the Spanish flu, up to 50 million or more people died throughout the globe. So we have to learn a lesson from that, to be enormously careful and remember the principles of Pikuach Nefesh. So we started by speaking about Reb Chaim, his attitude about Krias HaTorah and Chavos Yochid, but I think the important message is Reb Chaim's attitude about Pikuach Nefesh and Sakana.
Well, Rabbi Menachem, thank you very much. It's always an honor to speak to you.
Pleasure to be with you, David.
Okay, cool. Bye-bye. Joining us is Rabbi Avrohom Cohen. He's the Rav of Ohev Yisroel in Monsey. He's the former editor of the Journal of Halacha and Contemporary Society. Many years ago, they published an article called Taking Risks, which we'd like to discuss with him. Welcome, Rabbi Avrohom.
Thank you very much.
So here's my question. You want to go daven, and there's some, or any other mitzvah, and there's some infinitesimal chance, whatever it is, I don't know what it is. It's a 1%, a 10th of a percent, a 20th of a percent, a 50th of a percent that you're going to get sick and maybe suffer injury from it. Doesn't necessarily have to be death. It could be people who are getting corona are having kidney issues. They're having lung issues the rest of their life, even those who recovered, some of them. Or alternatively, you want to take a job that is very risky. Halachically, how much risk is a person allowed to take?
If I can begin, we'll start our conversation. Number one, let's assume that every area might be different and all situations may be different. I don't know that one answer is going to fit all, and each person has different medical advice and different medical people that they follow. But I think a number of points have to be made before we actually talk about the topic. The society, for example, we need to make a distinction between the country opening up for economic reasons, the country opening up for other issues. As an example, let's talk about it. As there are 30 million people in America, whether that statistic is correct or not, but that's the statistic, that there are 30 million people in America who are unemployed. The decision to open up the country for economic reasons has to take into consideration the 30 million people who might not be able to pay their bills. There may be numerous people, for example, if we don't open up the hospitals, who may be suffering and getting, God forbid, heart attacks or need kidney transplants, who in fact may be losing more lives that way. This is a decision which is not the same as should we go to shul. There are, for example, tshuvas. Rav Moshe has a tshuva in regards to Parnassah. He has a tshuva in Choshen Mishpat. It's Chelik Aleph, it's Kuf Daled, where in fact, based on the Gemara at the end of Baba Metzia, he shows that for Parnassah, somebody can take risks. Certain risks a person can take for a Parnassah. There are certain risks that one can take for emotional issues. For example, you have somebody who's lonely. Somebody's very, very depressed. How many people committed suicide after the Depression? All of these are statistics which need to be taken into consideration when you're talking about open up the country for economic reasons or for social reasons. Rav Moshe has a tshuva again. This was in Choshen Mishpat, Samachay and Samavov. A person who was so concerned about their appearance that they would not walk out. So based on Taisus and Shabbos on Daf Nun Amid Beis, we find heterim even though it's a chovel beyatzmo. Not every situation is the same. And when we're talking about the country being opened up for economic reasons, mental issue reasons, etc. That is one thing, and mitzvahs are something completely different. I think that distinction has to be made because many people are talking about, this is an essential service, and therefore davening is surely an essential service. The yeshivas are surely an essential service. The rules and the criteria may not be the same, and I am assuming that for political issues are being all put aside and everybody is actually doing it honestly. Again, how the politics affects this is a totally different story, which we won't agree on, so let's move on. But what I find, I think, most important is that when I was younger, I remember reading that the history of the establishment of the State of Israel, one of the issues which came up was a question of what the language of the state should be. There were those who said English, there were those who said Yiddish, there were those who said Ivrit, etc., etc. Tremendous debate which took place as to what the language of the State of Israel should be. The Chazon Ish was of the opinion that it should be Yiddish. In fact, there were all sorts of questions in regards to opening up yeshivas where they would not speak Yiddish. The Chazon Ish was very, very strongly in favor of that. Many, many years later, somebody came to him and said to him, Rabbi, there's a school, there's a yeshiva opening up, and they're going to be talking Ivrit. We need to come out with great fanfare against it. To which the Chazon Ish supposedly responded, that issue has been taken up long ago. That battle was waged years ago. In fact, we lost the battle. Let's move on. From time to time, an evaluation needs to be made. What is the issue of the day, and what does the Ribbono Shel Olam want us to do in this particular moment, in this particular time? World War II, Jews in America had one issue. 1948, a different issue. 1976 was this issue, that issue. Things change from time to time. The question on the table today is, what does the Ribbono Shel Olam want us to do? Talk to Rabbonim, talk to Rabbi David Cohen. Rabbi David Cohen is as much in love of Tinoike Shel Beis Rabban, learning in the yeshivas, opening up the yeshivas, opening up the shuls, etc., etc. Learn through Rabbi Weiss. Rabbi Weiss has a pamphlet on the coronavirus. It's about 100 pages. Now, here are people who have such tremendous avas HaTorah, avas Beis HaKnesses. On the other hand, it could very well be that today the mitzvah is ushmartem es nafsheseichem.
So, Rabbi, talk about opening the government. How many deaths, if they came to a Rav and they said, okay, should we or shouldn't we open? Like, how many deaths are we allowed to have?
The government has to take into consideration where will there be more problems one way or the other. 30 million people not paying their bills or not being able to survive may be an issue of great importance. But that's a political issue. That's an economic issue. That's not a halachic issue.
So let's talk halachically. If you're the rabbi, and they come to you, they say, Rabbi, should we or shouldn't we open? We have 30 million people who are unemployed right now. Should we or shouldn't we open? It could cause real damage. On the other hand, if we open, there'll be another X number of tens of thousands of people who die. How do you paskin? How does halacha look at it?
So I had a very interesting experience many, many years ago. I went to visit somebody who was in the hospital, and I remember him telling me he was 59, and he needed an extremely dangerous procedure. He didn't have it, and if he didn't have it, he would die within 5 years. If he had it, he could live for another 20 years, and living for another 20 years, on the other hand, he might die right away through the procedure. They were taking out all of his immune system, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember coming home and talking with people about the Arbor Mitzoroyim. The HaTorah recently from Sazria Mitzorah about the Arbor Mitzoroyim. These Arbor Mitzoroyim, it's an incident with Naaman after they've done something and they were outside the Machane. They're outside the Machane and they decide that there's a Machane of the enemy. If they go in, the enemy could kill them. If they stay where they are, they'll die in 2 days. They went down. Miraculously, they were all saved. One sees that one can take certain risks. The question is, how much is the risk and what is the risk better? So we have tshuvas. we have actually various tshuvas on this. One of them, based on the Gemara, there are numerous Gemaras. Yevamis on Daf Yud Beis Amud Beis. It's in Shabbos Daf Kuf Chav Tes. Avodah Zorah Daf Lamed Amud Beis. There's a concept which is Shomer Psoim Hashem. Shomer Psoim Hashem says that there are times when if everybody is doing something, we somehow assume that the Rebbeinu Shalom will take care. We all drive in cars. We all fly on aeroplanes. Now, quite obviously, there are going to be certain times when it's dangerous. We all hear about car accidents. We all hear about airplane disasters where numerous people. So there is a concept which is called Shomer Psoim Hashem. The most famous discussion about Shomer Psoim Hashem came up in regards to smoking. People would come and would ask, am I permitted to smoke? There were times when the medical advice was that it's very, very dangerous and people should not smoke. You take a look at the Tzitz Eliezer. It's Chelek Tezvav. It's Tshuva Lamed Tes. It's gorgeous in the extreme, where he writes about it's extremely dangerous, and everybody in the profession says it's dangerous. He quotes the Chafetz Chaim, who's absolutely against it. He applies the Rambam in Hilchos Deis, which is Perek Daled, Halacha Aleph, where the Rambam says taking care of the guf is midarke Hashem hu lefikav tzorach laharchik odem atzmai midvorv hamaavdim es haguf. Then he quotes the Rambam in Hilchos Rotzeach, Perek Yud Aleph, Halacha Hey, harbe dvorim osru chachomim v'pnei sheyesh behem sakonis nefoshes v'chol ha'over aleim v'oima hareini misaken bi'atzmi umala acherim olai o eini makbid b'kach makin oisay makis mardes. We see that there was a tremendous emphasis on somebody making certain that, in fact, they protect themselves. What exactly is the criteria? What exactly is the criteria? We need to make a distinction.
So I miss you. So, Rabbi Avrohom, would you say somebody could smoke today because of Shomer Psoim Hashem?
I would. I mean, me personally, I tell people based on the Tzitz Eliezer that in fact they should not smoke, and that in fact it's awesome.
So let me ask you. So opening up the government today is going to cause tens of thousands of deaths, but it would, on the other hand, save people's lives, people who are, or save their insanity, their businesses, etc. So again, I come back to you, to the Rav. I'm just going to repeat Lamayif Apar, the same question. Halachically, are you or not, if you were the person who made the decision, are you or are you not allowed to open the government?
So I would say that in fact, in regards to opening up the government, there a decision has to be made where more lives can be saved or where more lives will be lost. It is a question which evolves around the question of how many people, in fact, would be worse than others. We have tshuvas. We have tshuvas, though, and we are much more machmir on pikuach nefesh than we are in regards to that question. Everybody knows that Reb Chaim.
Could you think of a halachic example of where a decision is made where, okay, here we're going to lose so many lives, here we're going to lose so many lives, and therefore we should vote to lose this many lives because it's less. Can you think of a halachic precedent for that?
Rav Moshe has a tshuva in regards to it's in Choshe Mishpat on Beis on Daf Ayim Gimel, where he and actually pretty much there's a difference of opinion slightly between him and the Achiezer as to how much of a risk a person is permitted to take. Rav Moshe, first of all, there is a discussion as to whether or not it's a chiyuv or an obligation. But the Achiezer was of the opinion.
In what case? What's the case?
The case was where there was a small risk as far as a benefit in regards to some type of surgical procedure, which the benefit was great and the risk was small. Rav Moshe would say that would be okay. He was of the opinion that you needed actually a 50-50 kind of a relationship. The risk is the benefit and the risk are the same. The Achiezer, Reb Chaim Isaac Rudensky, he was far more lenient, and he was of the opinion that the option was always available to the person. It was really a question of how much risk a person can take in order for the Chaye Olam. But here we're not talking about that. All of the tshuvas that we're talking about is a discussion between Chaye Shor and Chaye Olam. The example that I gave you before, where I came to visit this person and he told me if I don't get the surgery, he would pass away within 5 years. If he gets the surgery, he could live for 20 years. On the other hand, he might die immediately. So there the question would be the risk-cost factor. How much do I gain? How much do I lose? What's the chances? Rabbi Moshe was of the opinion that it was needed to have a good chance of success. You don't just run into something just because it sounds good. Now again, that is not the same as the option to open up the society in which we live. Opening up the society in which we live is a question of how do we keep 30 million people out of work. So you may answer, well, let the government support everybody. That could be a viable solution. On the other hand, our question is, should I go to the minyan? Should I open up the yeshivas? There, our standard is much greater. Our standard is, why would we take a chance on nefesh achas b'Yisroel? So I don't know that the rules are, and that's my point really, is that I don't think that the same criteria are used for opening up the country and opening up barbershops and opening up salons and opening up bowling alleys are going to be the same as it is to open up a yeshiva.
On the other hand, Rabbi Cohen, the Posek, and I say the Posek, the Pesach Tshuva brings it. Mishnah Berurah, Mishnah Berurah doesn't opine it. Pri Megadim brings it. That based on the Gemara in Psachim, that where it's lo shchia chazeka, a person is allowed to be machnis himself to a sakana to do a mitzvah, because the mitzvah will protect them. It's based on the Gemara in Psachim. Daf Ches Samid Beis, the Gemara says, Shluchei mitzvah ein nizakin, and therefore, where it's lo shchia chazek, you're allowed to make bedika like in a wall where an akrev, a scorpion, may live, because the mitzvah will guard you where it's lo shchia chazeka. And the question is, what's considered lo shchia chazeka? So the accepted halacha is that Rabbi Yashiv used to say this with, if it's less than a 5% chance, it's called lo shchia chazeka, and based on that, you would be able to be yourself into a safek sakana. So the question is opening up a yeshiva or a shul is that rise to the level of shchia chazek, where there's more than a 5% chance that with social distancing that you could get hurt. I think wouldn't that be the case?
Yeah, there are other Gemaras in the same way. Shema mitzvahs layed adovara. Acha made a terrible mistake. Acha, the Gemara says, saw a father tell his son to go up the ladder and to perform the mitzvah of Shiluach HaKain. The son went up the ladder and he fell down and he died. So Acha reasoned, well, where is the Shema mitzvahs layed adovara? To which the Gemara, one teretz in the Gemara is shchicha hezeka. The rung on the ladder was broken, and therefore it was shchicha hezeka. So the rung was broken and the fall, and he died. That is called shchicha hezeka. The question is what's called shchicha hezeka. The Gemara is of the opinion, for example, that not to do milah on certain weather conditions. When certain weather conditions, today everybody does milah no matter what or not. The Gemara had that if on a cloudy day one should not perform a bris milah. Today everybody performs the bris milah. We perform bris milahs all the time. That's called Shema Psoyim Hashem. But why would one be taking the option, and we don't know medically what's going to happen. The doctors the professionals all seem to be saying that if this could come back with a vengeance. Why wouldn't it be prudent to come along and to say, look, let's wait, let's see. Let's wait and let's see. We can always open up a week later. We seem to be putting this down into statistics because the government is opening up everything else, which I don't really think is a proper analysis. think at the moment it might be a very, very prudent to warn to see. Let's see what happens. Let's see.
Rabbi Cohen, how do you respond to people who say, "Look, if people could go back to work, and people could go back to the gym, and people could go to supermarkets, why can't they go daven?"
We are definitely of the opinion. Everybody knows that we are much more machmer and pikuach nefesh than everywhere else. We are very, very concerned about pikuach nefesh. We go on the basis of what the medical profession tells us, whether or not somebody should eat on Yom Kippur. We tell them whether or not they should ride on Shabbos. My wife has to go to the hospital to have a baby, so I drive her to the hospital. I go to the hospital. We are not makil in Hilchas Shabbos and Hilchas Yom Kippur. We're machmer and pikuach nefesh. The Chazon Ish would tell people that they should visit in the hospital, even if it required a certain amount of Chil Shabbos, to visit someone in the hospital, because people who are in the hospital and have visitors get better attention. The Chazon Ish, who famously ruled that in a pandemic or in a problem, that one would be allowed to have certain times on autopsy performed, because it's very, where is the Cholul Lefanecha? We're all the Cholul Lefanecha. Why compare it to what society is pushing to do, to what the Halacha says, which is we are very, very machmer on pikuach nefesh. There is nothing more important today than being matzel nefesh achas mi-Yisroel. I don't know why we're comparing it, and I don't really think the comparison is the same. Again, putting all political issues aside, we're assuming that everybody in government is altruistic and doing it for wonderful reasons. But the question is, why are we comparing it to opening up the economy and talking about opening up barbershops when we're talking about possibly saving people's lives? So you're going to come along and you're going to tell me we're going to enforce social distancing. Are we really going to be able to enforce social distancing? Or what are we going to do? We're going to open up a shul and we're going to tell the shul that everybody, we're going to take the first 20 people who sign up and they're going to come to the minyan. And what's going to happen when 24 people show up? So, well, what are we going to do? We're going to tell them that what? You have to leave? And somebody's going to say, I don't want to leave. And what are we going to do? Are we not asking for issues that we really can't control? I told somebody, just as an aside conversation, I said to them, well, we're maybe thinking of having learning Shavuos night. Just learning. We won't even daven. We'll just learn Shavuos night. We don't get hundreds of people coming to learn on Shavuos night, so it's a controlled environment. We can have really social distancing. We'll have learning at night. By the next day, I got 3 calls. What time are you davening Shavuos morning? People I don't even know. Right. It is very difficult to control the situation that we find ourselves in.
Right. So your suggestion is hold off on opening the shuls?
My suggestion is that we would follow the best medical advice of the day and err on the side of caution. All the Rabbonim that I have spoken to and that I deal with have all said, let's be prudent, let's be wise, let's see what happens. The fact that the government is compelled to open up all of their institutions, okay, that's the government. They have their issues that they have to deal with. On the other hand, our matzav is one of a pikuach nefesh, and we have to be very, very careful. Somebody told me about a shadchan who suggested a shidduch, a boy and a girl, and the boy and the girl got sick. On the date, they got sick. Now, I don't know that they got sick because of the date. I don't know. I can't tell you. The shadchan was really distraught. What should we be doing today? What should we be doing today? The tshuva is about medical advice. We all listen to the doctors. We tell people to eat on Yom Kippur because of the doctors say so. We tell all people to ride on Shabbos because the doctor says so. And suddenly, where the medical profession seems I'm sure you read the newspaper and listen to the news the same as I do, and the top medical profession seems to be of the opinion that it may be a very good idea to be very cautious. Now, how cautious? When do we? Why do we have to be in the forefront? Why is it necessary to say, well, we'll take the statistics and we'll say 50-50, Moshe says, Achiezer says, but that's all for Chaye Olam. Here we're talking about, I can daven at home. Somebody wants to daven so greatly with a minyan. Everybody is aware of the Bir Halacha, where he discusses the importance of maybe even the superior to davening Vasikin. Maybe we should all start davening Vasikin. Now, Vasikin is pretty early today, so maybe we should all be davening Vasikin.
Well, Rabbi Cohen, thank you very much. We appreciate your wise and sharing your knowledge about this topic.
Be well and stay well, and the Rabbanu Shalom should give us all intelligence, to do the right thing. Very, very vexing questions, and hopefully we'll all have the wisdom and Siyata D'Shmaya to make a good decision.
Amen. Thank you so much, Rabbi Cohen.
Be well.